But maybe a good start would be to recognize within yourself the ability to understand anything, because that ability is there, as long as it's explained clearly enough. And then go and ask for explanations. And if you're thinking right now, what do I ask for? Ask yourself if there's anything in your life that you want changed. That's where to start.
With a development span of over 7 years from creator Jonathan Blow, the same indie darling who gave us Braid back in 2008, and finally released to us in 2016 after a 2011 announcement for a release, and developed and published by Thekla Inc., it's The Witness for the PlayStation 4. Also available on the PC, and eventually an iOS version is planned for release with other platforms a bit later, to quote the website. Inspired heavily by Myst, in The Witness you play an unspecified character on a remote island with no inhabitants in sight. Or at least none that are moving around much anymore. If they ever were at all to begin with, I honestly don't know. Instead, this lonely island is littered with numerous environments and puzzles scattered throughout, starting off simple enough with maze puzzles. As you gain access to explore the island, puzzles begin to become much more complicated than they appear. But does complexity make for a good game? Let's find out by starting things off with the good. If you couldn't already tell, The Witness is a beautiful game, from the vivid color palette, to the different environments that can be found around the island itself, to the simple yet effective art style and graphical presentation of the game, to the many perspective-based visuals you can find around the island as well. The Witness is one of the best looking games I've played in recent memory since the vanishing of Ethan Carter. Both the PlayStation 4 and PC version, as far as I can tell, run identical to one another on max settings. But do keep in mind, this game isn't very demanding to run. The puzzles themselves start out simple enough as basic maze solving to separating black and white blocks, to then ramping up in difficulty as you continue to explore the island. Ramping up in difficulty is a bit of an understatement. This game is possibly one of the hardest puzzlers I've ever played. Some of these puzzles are so obscure and difficult to answer, it can drive you mad if you don't know the rules to solving them. So my best advice I can honestly give you if you plan on playing this is this. Most puzzles that you can't solve at first glance, you're simply better off going somewhere else. Chances are you'll find an area with the same rules as the puzzle you were previously stuck on, but much more simple, allowing you to learn the rules and solving that type of puzzle so you can go back and solve the ones you were stuck at. It's almost like finding an ability that lets you explore different areas or sections you couldn't reach before, like in Metroid or Castlevania, and it's a very satisfying feeling to have that eureka moment once you figure out the rules of these puzzles and begin opening up new areas. Not to mention the massive amount of optional puzzles, hidden environmental puzzles, audio recordings of philosophical quotes, and plenty of other secrets you'll be able to find and solve around the island. Going for 100% puzzle completion can easily last you upwards of 50 or more hours, so if you love puzzle games like myself, you've got plenty on your plate here. Now, in terms of a soundtrack, sadly the game doesn't feature any music. However, the audio design itself of the game is fantastic. From the ambient sounds of the environment of the island, to the audio logs you can find scattered around the island.
In the first case, there was no anger. In the second, there was. Because in the first case, the boat was empty, and in the second, it was occupied. And so it is with man. If he could only roam empty through life, who would be able to injure him? Shuangzi, 4th century BC.
To even certain puzzle areas on the island itself. I highly recommend you use a good pair of headphones. A few puzzles in this game are based entirely around sound and figuring out the right pitch level to solve certain puzzles, and I honestly can't imagine anyone being able to complete them with shoddy TV speakers, or trying to simply brute force them. But with all that being said, now it's time for a few things some people may not want to hear. The bad. You know what gets old quickly? The sound of nothing as you trot along the landscape. I honestly wish this game had some ambient music of some kind, but at the same time, I get why it doesn't. Music looping can get very frustrating very quickly if you're stuck on a puzzle, and it would obviously interfere with some of the sound-based puzzles. So this is just minor nitpicking, and you can obviously just play your own music while trying to solve puzzles, or listen to a podcast or something. This is the perfect game for it. Another minor grievance I had personally, but once again I quickly realized there is a very good reason for this. The boat to traverse around the island is on a rail system. There is no freeform control of any kind. You select a point on the map and the boat will follow a set course. But what I found annoying was actually trying to stop the damn thing at times when I needed to make a sudden stop or slow down. You have to do a quick line graph to adjust the speed or stop it, and at times I found doing this, at least with my DualShock 4 controller, to be a bit of a pain when I needed to stop in a hurry. But once again, this is very minor. But probably the biggest issue I have is the lack of hand-holding or explanation of some of the rules of these puzzles. Now I know what you're thinking, I just talked about how this is a good thing. This game will not explain itself or hold your hand in any way, and in many ways that is good. You need to learn the rules of how these puzzles work in order to progress by finding easier variants of them around the island that can teach you how they work in order to solve the harder ones you may stumble on, as I mentioned earlier in the review. But at times, the game does a poor job of doing this. I had a few moments personally where I found a new area with a new set of puzzles that were just too easy to solve, and solved them either by sheer luck or brute force, and then simply couldn't figure out what the rules of those puzzles were since I solved them in this manner. So when I stumbled on a harder variant of them later on, I still had no idea what the rule to solve it was, and basically had to do a lot of trial and error to eventually learn the rules of solving them. Not to mention some of the curveballs the game throws your way with the odd puzzle that is only seen a few times throughout the game that I quickly either forgot the rules of, or had no bloody clue what the rule was to begin with. But the one common complaint I've seen in user reviews on Steam and other media is, a lot of people are getting upset over the lack of a narrative or story in this game. I personally clocked in at least over 30 hours into this game and solved a good chunk of the puzzles, and at least from what I can tell, there really isn't any sort of narrative or story in this game at all. If there is one, it's buried deep beneath puzzles. Maybe the story is a puzzle in itself? I honestly couldn't tell you, nor do I agree that this is actually a bad thing in my opinion. But with that being said, let's discuss the opinion. Overall, The Witness in my own opinion is a fantastic puzzler and quite possibly one of the hardest puzzle games I've ever played. At times, this game made me feel like a complete idiot. Other times, it gave me plenty of eureka moments and felt very satisfying to solve difficult puzzles. I highly recommend you don't use a walkthrough or guide for this game, because as I said, there is no narrative or story to be had locked away behind these puzzles, and you're paying up to $40 to solve puzzles. That's really about it. So why even soil the experience, not to mention if you don't know the rules to solving these puzzles. Good luck later on in the game attempting to use a walkthrough. I'll just say that. But the big question to be asked, do I recommend this game? Honestly, despite my praise and as much as I personally enjoyed this game, I genuinely couldn't recommend this game to the average video game playing person. A lot of people went in this game, I think, hoping for a game like the Talos Principle or Portal or some sort of adventure game. Basically, a lot of people expected a narrative. This game won't give you that. It'll give you puzzles, very hard puzzles, maybe some philosophical advice, and that's about it from what I personally gathered. Even if you're curious about playing this game and don't have much experience with puzzle games, I probably still wouldn't recommend it. There is no hand-holding. The clues you need to find on your own. The rules you need to learn on your own. But if this interests you, then hell yeah, give it a go. I quickly found myself addicted to the satisfaction of solving this game's puzzles and mysteries, and can still probably see myself coming back to it after this review and attempting to still aim for 100% completion. But now, with all that being said, it's time for my rating. out of 10, fuck this room.